She came to the date straight from work, still smelling of detergent and dreams. The scent followed her like a quiet announcement: clean linen, lemon soap, a trace of starch and steam. It clung to the cuffs of her sleeves and hid in the loose strands of hair that had slipped from her bun sometime around 4 o'clock, when the last of the office shirts had been folded and sealed in plastic. She had changed out of her uniform in the tiny staff bathroom, pulling a navy dress from her tote bag, one that didn't quite match her shoes but matched the version of herself she wanted to be that night. He was already seated when she arrived, checking his phone beneath the amber lights of the restaurant patio. She saw him before he saw her. For a moment, she stood at the edge of the sidewalk, feeling the hum of traffic behind her and the small tremor in her fingers. She pressed her palms against her dress as if she could smooth away the day. She had almost canceled. The message sat drafted in her phone all afternoon. Sorry, something came up at work. Rain check. It would have been easy. Work had, in fact, come up. 3 late pickups, a broken press machine, a woman who insisted her silk blouse had been ruined when it was only the lighting that betrayed it. By 6, her feet ached and her shoulders carried the weight of other people's garments and grievances. The idea of sitting across from a stranger and trying to be charming felt like lifting something heavier than she could manage. But she had thought about the way he'd written his messages, never rushed, never careless. He'd asked about her favorite books and actually waited for the answers. When she told him she worked at a dry cleaner, he didn't make a joke about losing socks. He said, "That must mean you're good at taking care of things." So she walked toward him. He looked up at the sound of her steps. His face shifted from distraction to recognition to something softer. "Hi," he said, standing quickly, almost knocking his chair back. "You made it." "I did," she said, hopping. He couldn't see the imprint of the day still stamped across her face. "Sorry if I'm a little late," he offered. "Laundry adjacent," she finished, and surprised herself with a smile. He laughed, not at her but with her, and that small distinction loosened something in her chest. They sat, the waiter came and went. Water was poured. Menus opened like shields between them, then lowered again. "You came straight from work?" he asked. She nodded. "Couldn't risk going home. My couch is persuasive." "I'm glad you didn't listen to it." She looked at him then properly. He had kind eyes, the sort that seemed to rest on you rather than skim. His shirt was neatly pressed, and she wondered briefly if he'd ironed it himself or if someone else had. She resisted the urge to inspect the collar for missed creases. "Do I smell like industrial-strength lavender?" she asked lightly. He leaned back, pretending to consider. "You smell clean, like Sunday morning." It was such an unexpected answer that she forgot to be self-conscious. "Sunday morning," she repeated. "That's better than what I was expecting." "What were you expecting?" "You smell like you wrestled a washing machine and won." He grinned. "That too." She laughed, and it felt real. Not the polite version she used at work when customers complained about microscopic stains. This one bubbled up, bright and unguarded. As they talked, she found herself telling him about her day, not the dull details, but the small moments that stuck. The elderly man who brought in his late wife's coat every winter just to have it cleaned and stored, even though she'd been gone 5 years. The teenager who'd needed her graduation dress altered at the last minute and had nearly cried with relief when it fit. The way steam rose from the presses in the back room like ghosts trying to escape. "I always thought I'd do something else," she admitted, tracing the rim of her glass. "I studied art history for 2 years. I wanted to work in a museum or restore paintings, something delicate and important." "And this is?" he asked gently. She shrugged. "It's shirts and tablecloths and the occasional wedding gown." "Wedding gowns are important," he said. "They hold whole days inside them." She looked at him, surprised by the seriousness in his voice. "I guess," she said. "I just thought I'd be somewhere else by now." "Where?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. The truth felt too big for a first date. Somewhere brighter. somewhere where her hands didn't ache at night, somewhere where she wasn't measuring her weeks in piles of other people's laundry. "I don't know," she said finally, "just further." He nodded as if that made perfect sense. They ordered food. The sky deepened into indigo. String lights flickered on overhead, casting everything in a forgiving glow. She felt the day slowly peel away from her, like a layer she could set down beside her chair. He told her about his job architecture, mostly small projects, community centers and renovations. "I like fixing things," he said, "or making spaces where people can feel at home." "You're good at taking care of things," she echoed, and he smiled at the reminder. At some point, he reached across the table to move her glass out of the way of a passing waiter. His fingers brushed hers, brief, accidental, electric. She became acutely aware of the faint scent of detergent rising from her skin. "I hope you're not too tired," he said. "We can call it early if you need." She shook her head. "No, I'm okay." And she was, more than okay. She was present in a way she hadn't been in weeks. When the food arrived, she realized she was hungry, not just for the meal but for this. Conversation that didn't revolve around invoices and stain removers, laughter that wasn't filtered through exhaustion. "Can I ask you something?" he said halfway through dinner. "Sure." "What's the dream part?" She blinked. "The dream part. You said you came smelling of detergent and dreams." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't realized she'd spoken the second half aloud when she arrived. "I did say that, did I?" she murmured. "You did, and I've been wondering what the dreams are." She looked down at her plate at the careful arrangement of greens and grains. It would be easy to deflect, to make a joke. Instead, she took a breath. "I want to open my own place someday," she said. "Not a dry cleaners, a restoration studio for fabrics. Old quilts, vintage dresses, heirlooms people think are beyond saving. I want to learn the proper techniques, maybe apprentice somewhere. Bring things back to life instead of just pressing them flat." His expression didn't change into polite interest or mild confusion. It sharpened, like he was seeing her in higher resolution. "That's not a small dream," he said. "I know, that's why I keep folding shirts instead." Or, he said carefully, "That's why you're learning how to handle delicate things." She hadn't thought of it that way. The restaurant noise swelled and softened around them. She imagined the future she rarely allowed herself to picture. A sunlit studio, bolts of fabric stacked like rainbows against the wall, her hands steady and sure as she stitched history back together. "It feels far away," she admitted. "So did tonight," he said, "at noon." She smiled at that. After dinner, they walked. The night air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of rain. She told him about the art history classes she'd loved, the way a single thread in a tapestry could reveal centuries of trade and migration. He told her about the first building he designed on his own, and how he'd stood across the street just to watch people walk in and out. They stopped at a crosswalk, the red light glowing above them. A breeze lifted her hair, and she caught a hint of lavender again. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "Me too." The light changed, but neither of them moved immediately. "Can I see you again?" he asked. The question hung between them, simple and enormous. "Yes," she said, without overthinking it. He exhaled, as if he'd been holding that breath all evening. They parted at the corner near the bus stop. He hesitated, then leaned in, not a kiss, not yet, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, close enough that the space between them felt charged with possibility. "Text me when you get home," he said. "I will." She watched him walk away, hands in his pockets, turning back once to wave. Then she boarded the bus, finding a seat by the window. The city slid past in blurred lights. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, tired, yes, but lit from within. She lifted her wrist to her nose, inhaling. Detergent and dreams. For so long she had treated them as opposites, one practical, one foolish, one paying the bills, the other collecting dust in the back of her mind. Tonight they didn't feel so separate. Her phone buzzed before she even reached her stop. "I had a really good time," he wrote. "You smell like Sunday morning, by the way, in case you were still wondering." She laughed softly, earning a curious glance from the man across the aisle. "I had a good time too," she typed back. "Thanks for not minding the laundry-adjacent vibes." "Are you kidding?" he replied. "It's my new favorite scent." She shook her head, smiling at the screen. Then she hesitated, fingers hovering. "Next time," she wrote, "I might come smelling like fabric dye and ambition." He responded almost instantly, "I can't wait." The bus jolted to a stop. She stood, heart steady and light. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, she felt the familiar weight of her tote bag against her hip, the one that carried her work shoes, her folded uniform, the practical pieces of her life. But it also carried something else now. Not a promise, not yet. Just a beginning. She walked home beneath the streetlights, the faint scent of lavender trailing behind her, and for the first time in a long while, the distance between where she was and where she wanted to be didn't feel quite so far.